Over the last few days, the World Rapid Play Championship and then the World Blitz Championship took place in Berlin, and I'd like to look at both of those. First of all, the Rapid World Championship. Well, I'm sure it's not a secret that Magnus Carlsen won this tournament, and it was a convincing victory. He ended up a point clear of the field and went through the tournament undefeated, and I'd like to look at one of his games. This was played in round 2. Carlsen has the white pieces, and with black is a young up-and-coming player from Germany, Dennis Wagner. Well, Carlsen has a very nice position. He has control here. You can see that black has this backward pawn on e6, and the double rooks tie black's pieces to defending that pawn. But the king side is blocked. This pawn here is blocked by the king. I mean, the king looks slightly strangely placed on h6, but white can't exploit that for the moment. Somehow white needs to make further progress. I really like this game because I think for a rapid play game, it's somehow very impressive, the kind of strategy that Carlsen displays here. So first of all, a4. So no progress on the king side in the centre, but a4 starts to gain ground on the queen side. I'm a big fan of this kind of advance of the rook's pawn. It doesn't really harm white's position in any way, but the rook pawn can be very provocative. And now black always has a dilemma in this kind of position. Do you let this a-pawn run, or do you blockade it at some moment? So, for example, should you play a5 here? Very hard to say. I think one of the problems is that this leaves the b5 square weakened, and b6 as well, so that, and white doesn't have to do this, but one possible idea might be to play knight e5. This, I think, would have to be exchanged off. And then the queen perhaps could come over to d3, and you never know, try and come in here. There's also sometimes the option to play b3 and c4. That was one of the ideas behind a4, is to claim control over the b5 square, preventing black playing b5 himself. So it's very hard to know how to deal with this a-pawn's advance. Wagner decided to wait, bishop f6, and the pawn went on again. And again, black could blockade this with a6, but this would give the knight a square on c5 potentially. Another plan, again, is this idea of knight e5 followed by b3 and c4 to break through in the middle. But Wagner decided to wait. He kept at least the queen active on this diagonal. And now the pawn went all the way, a6. Again a dilemma for black. Do you pass or do you exchange? If the pawn is taken, then of course white is going to recover this pawn. Rook a1. And, well, it's looking dangerous. But black is not down and out there. You can play rook here and then prevent any attacks along the 6th rank with rook b6. So that's another option that black had, but of course the rook could come back. Perhaps you redeploy like this and get knight c5 in at some moment. It's very hard to know as the defender how to tackle this one, but Wagner decided to try and keep the position as closed as possible. I think that's a very understandable decision, but he leaves this pawn on a6, and this turns into a real trump. Knight b4. So already we can see that this knight has potentially a nice square to leap into here, and also there are potential tactics on the e-file exploiting a potential pin here. So let's see how this worked out. Queen f7. I mean, black can hardly move in the position. Queen d3, now that's very nice because this sets up this possibility of exchanging at some moment in favourable circumstances. And once again, you never know, this might be an option. But first of all, before taking any compromising action. Carlsen just improves the position of his king. This is very nice. In such a position, when you have control, one of the mottos is do not rush, just improve everything first. So first of all, the king comes to blockade. Now black played rook c4. I think it's very difficult to know what to do here. Probably lost already. And Carlsen made a decisive breakthrough. Queen g6. So the queens are exchanged. And now if king takes pawn, then knight takes d5, exploiting that pin. And you can see in this rook and pawn endgame that the a pawn will fall, and that turns into a very powerful passed pawn. And of course there are weak pawns here as well once the a pawn drops. So obviously white winning that position. Wagner played instead bishop takes d4. Well, this isn't really working. Of course he wants the bishop to be taken and then rook takes knight, but rook takes pawn is much simpler. So white gets the breakthrough. And then knight takes d5. Well, white has won a pawn, but I think the really important thing here is that white is breaking through into the position, and once again a7 is a target, among other things, and this starts to be an important pass pawn as well. Rook a4, going behind the a6 pawn, but that leaves the king side open, and now this is very embarrassing for the bishop. Came back in this direction. Well, Wagner wanted to maintain the cover of e7, otherwise the rook would check, but unfortunately this leaves the bishop in a terrible position, and after, for example, rook takes a6, rook f7 is completely winning. If king takes, then you can take the bishop, and, well, let's go the whole way. If king g8, then we have a checkmate on h7. Beautiful strategy from Carlsen. So that was the World Rapids, and a day later the World Blitz Championship took place, and I'll let you know what happened in that, if you don't already know, in the next clip.